Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's now November. Can you believe it? Scary how quickly this year has gone. John is going to talk to us today around career pathways. But before he gets going, and I think you all know John, so I'm not going to do any further introductions. Before he gets going, please let me just remind you of our rules for engagement. Conversations is intended to be an interactive session. So please engage with John. The way you do that is by using the chat box. So please, if you will type any questions or comments that you have into the chat box, then I will bring them to John's attention when it seems a convenient time, and then he will respond to you. So your microphones and your cameras will be off for this duration. Please don't let that stop you, though, from engaging with John. John, I think we're ready. If I can hand over to you, and I will close off my camera.
Thank you, Andy. Let me just do that. Press that button there. Come on. Okay, there we go.
And okay, so the slide. All good.
All good. Good morning, everybody. Today's conversation, and you know, Andy says it must be a conversation, so I'm sure Andy will interrupt me, is what I call the forgotten link. And it's that alignment between learning pathways and career pathways. And I came across this concept or I was reminded about this concept about a year ago when I was talking to a corporate client, quite a big corporate. And somebody was actually a line manager, it wasn't a person in skills development, said, but we need to do this aligning of learning and career pathways. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And so when I was talking to Andy about what I wanted to talk about, he was also like, John, this has got to get me. I'm not that excited yet. So I'm hoping that I'm going to get you a little bit excited and interested in this, what I call forgotten link. And so this picture here is where I want to start, because if we think about it, there is in many organizations, certainly in the organizations that are my clients, there's an HR department, and they really worry about job descriptions, and they worry about recruitment, and you know, in due course, they also worry about having to exit people, whether they retire or they are just gently exited out. And that's an HR focus, and they write job descriptions. And there's almost around an organizational design, wanting to see, you know, and then there is the L&D function. And learning and development is about getting people trained up. And it is my experience, and I'm not judging everybody, but I certainly think I'm speaking on behalf of many organizations in South Africa. There is a lack of alignment between those career paths that the HR people are putting together and the learning pathways that are happening, that are facilitated often by us as skills development facilitators or L&D managers, or, you know, and so that's our, in a way, our responsibility is people that are more interested in skill development, in L&D, in education and training to close this gap. But it is also a responsibility on HR to open their minds to this gap. And if we just think about L&D, I think the NQF has become quite entrenched in our heads. So we think, okay, learning is level 1 to level 10. I don't know, you know, not obviously, but subconsciously, that might be where our minds is. And so let me just talk some more. I also wanted to make this point. Now, I don't think it's a legislation issue or change of regulation issue. Those things take a lot of work, and sometimes, you know, almost so what. So we've got an NQF Act. We've got all these acts. We've got departments. We've got SAQA. We've got CETAs. But there's my little sad face at the bottom, because truth be told, we still have a skills challenge in South Africa, which actually ultimately manifests also in huge unemployment. So, and yes, of course, I'm not saying HR people are not, you know, it's not partly their responsibility, but us as L&D managers, because that's the people, we're the people we can do something about. These are the three things I think. Hang on, before I get to that, I just wanted to, emphasize that going back to the first SAQA Act, some of you will remember there was a SAQA Act that was replaced by the NQF Act, and in fact now recently there was an NQF Amendment Act. But one thing has been consistent in all those sets of legislation are the objectives of the NQF, and there you'll see in Objective 2, facilitate access to mobility and progression with education, training, and career paths. And let me say, I worked at SAQA for well over 10 years, and I'm as guilty as maybe others are. We didn't think about career paths when I was in SAQA meetings. We were talking about articulation in education. You know, I want to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, whether it is in the QCTO space or in the CHE space. How does this all articulate? We didn't think about how this relates to jobs and to learning pathways. So what I'm trying to highlight here is it's not a criticism of bad legislation. It's been in the legislation. We just haven't highlighted it. Today, I'm trying to start us on a journey of highlighting the importance of career paths and learning path alignment. So what can we do as skills development facilitators? I think there are three things that we can and actually should do. The first thing is we should start talking to our clients to ensure that job and career paths, and you can just imagine, here's a career path, or here's a job, and it's got this job description, and then in that job description, what learning is required to get to the next job, and ultimately you map these jobs into career paths. So the one thing is aligning those with appropriate education, training, and development, and I'll talk a bit more about that. So when we think about a job description, yes, there is some specifications, but I'm suggesting take it further to actual, detailed education and training that is required, not only for the job that you aspire to get to join the organization, but if you want to move through the organization, you need to be able to say, I need to this learning, and ultimately I can be the CEO or whatever you aspire to. So the one thing is we as SDFs have got to work on developing career paths and aligning that to education, training, development. The other thing we've got to do as SDFs, because this is our space, is we've got to talk to education, training, development providers. And we've got to get them to think more about this alignment of the learning pathways or the programs, the courses, the offerings within the ETD space. How do they align with these career paths? How do they support particular? And I know there's a journey here, and some of you might be saying, but that's what the OQSF is about, and the OFO, and that's what the QCTO is trying to do. I'm saying it's more than that. It's not just the formal learning. And I'll come back to that. I'll unpack it in a few seconds again. And the third thing, yes.
Can I ask a question that occurs to me now? It seems to me that the career pathing and the succession planning are two different sides actually of the same coin. Because succession planning, you say, well, how do we develop people into this position? And career pathing says, well, let's start where you are and where could you be going? And do you think that if we're not really, and I think you're right, I don't think we are paying much attention to career pathing. Do you think that's also then true? We're not paying much attention to succession planning?
I think organizations do pay attention to succession planning, but it comes out of, in fact, a different field quite often, which is the risk management field. Because I mean, in my corporate days, I remember we would go and do risk management. We'd have a workshop and we'd identify the risks, and one of the risks would always be succession planning. And we'd identify, the CEO, what happens if the CEO goes? Who are we going to replace him or her with? But in fact, succession planning should start from, what do we need to fill junior jobs, middle jobs, senior jobs, executive jobs, and specialist jobs across the organization. And then you're right, those become career paths. And then, Andy, it's exactly, so what learning do you need to go from being a junior to a middle to a senior to an executive? And that's the, okay.
Makes sense.
So SDFs, there's a conversation to be had amongst your corporate clients. SDF, there's also a conversation to have, number two, amongst the education, training, and development in the education, training, development world. And the other thing I just want to touch on is SDFs. You have an advocacy role to play here. And I'll talk a little bit about these three again. So, you know, this is what I'm suggesting is you know, here's a nice picture on the right-hand side, the retail career roadmap. So now you're in Pick and Pay, and maybe Pick and Pay does this. I don't know, but I know that they've just appointed Sean Summers, and they're trying to bring Pick and Pay back to be one of the, you know, the leading, not the worst retail provider in South Africa. That's sorry, what I read in the media. Good luck, Sean. But there is this idea of, okay, I've become a packer. I've got a temporary job at Pick and Pay as a packer. You know, I've had challenges in life, but what do I need? I actually want to become a store manager. What's the journey I can follow? And I think that employee should be able to go to the HR or the L&D environment or whatever, you know, or their supervisor and say, show me what is the knowledge, the experience, the competences I've got to develop, what are, you know, to get to, I want your job. And the person shouldn't be threatened by that. They should be able to say, wow, okay, yeah, it is, and it should be clear, it should be available. I'm not sure that those career paths are available, you know, widely in South Africa. So that's the one point. So organizations have got to do this work. I think the other thing I want to make is just highlight to us as SDFs is we really do this work well. We will have realistic WSPs, and we'll have realistic annual train reports, and we'll come up with goods, you know, through the CETA system where we submit all this information. We'll have good sectoral skills plans or skills gaps, and in fact, we'll have a national. Because recently, you know, the critical skills again the list was published in South Africa for South Africa, and I looked at that list and I thought this is quite a bizarre list. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't seem to intrinsically flow back to what are the problems in the world of work in terms of skills gaps. So that would be another sort of side benefit of good career path and learning path mapping. And of course, I touched on earlier, employees would know what they need to do to get the job that they aspire to get to.
John, so there's a couple of comments or questions raised on the slide. Firstly, from Shiran Boyson says, that path could be accredited and non-accredited, I assume. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So let me just go to this slide here, because I think in a way it talks to exactly that. You'll see I've got three bubbles here on this page. There's formal learning, there's non-formal learning, and there's informal learning. And absolutely correct. I think the learning pathway that aligns to a career pathway, it needs to specify the formal, the non-formal, and the informal, which could be the experiential part to get along the journey. And I just wanted to highlight here, we're talking formal. We're not only talking about qualifications, we're talking about designations. Let's not forget the professional bodies. We're talking about licenses. Many regulators say to have that job, you have to have a particular license. So those are all formal. They're things that you can put on the wall and, you know, they're very, you know, you brag about them. But then there's the non-formal, which is conferences, seminars, and especially if you're going up the leadership or you need to do CPD, you know, many CPD, yes, it's required for professional bodies, but quite often you need to stay up to date in your field. You have to go, you don't go and do another qualification, you do conference, seminars, workshops, and then of course you've got to do experiential learning as well. So for me, Andy, the question is brilliant because it answers this point. I just wanted to show the slide before that, which I just clicked over it quickly, because I wanted us to, as SDFs, to quickly remind us of when we look at this world of learning, we're talking about regulatory bodies on the left-hand side, regulatory bodies that issue licenses, professional bodies that issue designations like the ASDSA, universities, private higher education institutions like Millpark or, you know, Da Vinci, you guys might have heard of them. There are 130 of them. They're a substantial force in South Africa. The FETs, the public colleges, the specialist colleges like the agricultural colleges. There's the native colleges, which the DHET now registers separately. That's still an ongoing thing, and it's a conversation. And then there are over 10,000 seater, soon to be QCT only accredited private providers. You've got to get a head around all of that, and us as SDFs have got to be talking to the HR and making sure that when we think about these things, the formal, the non-formal, and the informal learning that builds into the career path, we haven't forgotten about all these components, so that ultimately when the employee, it's not like, oh my goodness, but I don't have a license, or oh, I haven't really worked on my particular skill that I would have got at a workshop. Okay, so that's important.
So John, sorry, before you go away from the slide, there's one consideration I want to throw at it. My own experience of what makes people really good at their job is the informal learning. So you've got your background qualifications, but how do you get really effective at doing something? It's by working with people, trial and error. In a sense, I would say that, and if you think about the example that we often use in learning, that iceberg example, we always say that 70% of what makes you really good is the informal learning. And in a sense, and I would say that picture, that circle should be a lot bigger, and we shouldn't just limit ourselves to formal learning as the elements of a career path. It's about saying to somebody in the organization, so if you want to take the next step, you've got to go and work in this department and that department. You have to be good at this and good at that, and you have to achieve these sorts of results here and there. That's what's going to position you to get your promotion.
Absolutely, Andy. And if I'd have done this, there's a picture that James Keevy, some of you will know James. He's an ex-ACWA guy. He does like a life flow chart, and he shows the insignificance of the time spent on formal learning versus the time spent on informal learning. So you're absolutely right. Informal learning is critical. And what I often say to people, because I do some career advice as well to young people, I say the qualification or the formal learning will get you the interview. You get you to have somebody looking at your CV, but it is really how you present yourself in that interview, because now you can demonstrate your experience, those other things, those soft skills. And soft skills. So absolutely, I agree with you, Andy. The challenge, of course, now to L&D managers and to HR managers, if they're going to map this and they're going to specify a learning pathway, it's easier to say, oh, this needs a BCom, plus maybe a financial services advisor license, plus they must have attended 4 conferences of the FBI or whatever, boom, and then they, but now they've got to then, and it becomes more general, 5 years experience. And I think the challenge is to unpack that into a little bit more detail, so that the employee can actually gain the relevant informal learning as well as the formal learning. Because otherwise what happens is people go and they get the honors or whatever, oh, this job requires the honors in marketing, and they get the job and they say, I'm applying for that. And then the bosses say, no, but you don't have the right experience. And she or he says, well, what does that mean? So there's a challenge here, and it's not a simple job, certainly. But I think, if at least I've, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. If I've at least got people, this audience to say, hang on, there is something here, this is not just, oh, well, another half an hour chat by John. Let me apply my mind. I will be excited. Let me just...
so there's 2 things. One thing I want to just comment from our side. What I'm hearing is that the HR, the learning people, we can't treat this as a tick box approach, where we're going to say, well, here's the formal accredited or non-accredited learning. Do these and you're going to be fine. Because in all likelihood, the particular employee is very aware that that's not going to get them their promotion. They're going to have to look good in the eyes of senior line managers before they're going to get a promotion. And so we shouldn't confine ourselves to just that conversation. We're not that, if we just talk about formal learning that they need to do, That's a tick box approach, and we're not going to win. The second is a comment from Michael Tiger, who says career paths / ladders need to be discussed / raised by SDS in Skills Development Committee or EE Committee in terms of possible barriers to transformation and talent management. Do you have any comments that you wanted to make on that?
I mean, I can start off just by saying, yes, I absolutely agree. But,
yes.
Because, yeah, human beings are human beings. And I think I must. So I absolutely agree. I wanted to come back to your other point, Andy, as well, and say,
okay,
organizations need to improve their ability to be good. And this is an L&D job, I think, but it could be an HR, it could be a career advice for employees inside an organization. I mean, I know that there's a huge amount of work done to help school leavers prepare for choosing their career. But what happens when you're 25 or 35 and you feel you're in the wrong place and you go and you say, you know, I need career advice. So part of this conversation is also, if organizations are really going to be orientated towards developing their people, surely they should have the capacity inside their organization to be able to listen to what the person is saying in terms of their own aspirations and give them wise, good career advice as well. And some of that career advice might even be to move to a career outside of the organization that they're in. So that's another component here. And so when we talk about career pathways, I also think there's a gap in South Africa in terms of career advisors, not for school leavers, but career advisors for people that are journeying through their career and find themselves a little bit stuck as well. So that's something that also a really leading organization, I think, would be amazing if they put that in place inside the organization as well.
I'd like to support that too, John, because I think that you know, it's not just people who feel maybe stuck in their careers, but if we are correct in assuming that certainly younger people move jobs often, they're already thinking about this sort of stuff. You know, they don't. They're not leaving it to chance. They're not assuming that another qualification is going to get them somewhere. They go out for other jobs. Now, if an organization doesn't bother to talk to them about the career and how their own organization can assist them and what they need to do to position themselves to get going in their own company, then I think that we're missing something big.
Yeah. And I think we are. And I mean, that earlier question that I quietly avoided, I mean, there are literally millions of people in this country that will take any job. And I'm currently coaching three young graduates. They're in sales, they're in a sales role. So I'm helping them with selling skills. The one graduate is in graduate in environmental science. The other one is a graduate, proper graduates from universities and leading universities, one environmental science. The one is in HR and the other one is in journalism. And they took jobs as salespeople because they need jobs. And so I'm helping them understand the world of work. And so for me, it's about, this is career paths and helping them just to think, oh, well, you know, I just have to get a job. I'll take any job and I'll get stuck and, you know, I'll retire a salesperson. No, not at all. You know, there is more to it, but that's the challenge we find in South Africa. Yeah, sure.
And so, John, there are two more bits in the chat box. One from Sharon Rich is a comment. The HR managers, L&D managers, and skills development professionals should be working together to develop career pathways and learning pathways so that they align to each other and that they work. And then question from Michael Tiger, could job shadowing and job rotation assist employees with gaining experiential learning under a mentor or a coach as part of being exposed to a potential new career path? Do you have comments on either or both of those?
Well, Sharon, first of all, I'll come back to the job shadowing. Sharon is 100% right. You know, I agree with that. The slide that I've got on the screen now is, so who starts the conversation? And I'm suggesting let us as professionals in our space start the conversation. And that's why advocacy, I've got the word there, because what am I talking about? I'm saying not only start the conversation, but there must be education. And ultimately, if you're going to have a conversation, you've got to be successful in persuading, and in our case, those HR people, and maybe the L&D managers inside the organization, if you're an SDF outside of the organization, to think about this and ultimately to change policies, practices, procedures, and systems so that it works. So Sharon's right. The other thing, job shadowing, I will go back to my time at Eskom. I joined in 1980. And at the time, Eskom had an extraordinary learning and development machine. And it certainly was aligned to career paths. I know that. And we embraced artisan development. We had graduates, we had technicians, and we had job shadowing right across the organization. Practical example of mine, I was sent to Australia for 6 months in 1989 to spend 6 months job shadowing the head of marketing at Sequeb so that I could come back to Eskom and certainly, with all that extra knowledge and skills and experience that I learned there, to make a contribution to Eskom. I don't see that working anything to the degree that it used to work in my organization. And I must sound like a when-we, and I apologize that, but that is just, one of the realities that I see missing in organizations today as we drive, my perception only, we drive bottom line almost at all costs. But John, now I'm in dangerous territory, so I've been keeping quiet.
So there's a further comment from Sharon who's saying, you're correct, it starts with the ST professional to bring in the HR professional and the L&D professional, start the discussions. As ASDSA, we should begin these discussions as subject matter experts.
Yeah, and the other thing, Andy, is we should not exclude the L&D people talking to the providers. The professional bodies are busy pumping out designations. Are those designations appropriate to the world of work? And making sure they are talking to the licensing bodies. I know Sharon's in the space of first aid and that kind of stuff. Are those first aid certificates that are issued, those licenses, are they the right, at the right level or the right whatever, standard? So the conversation it's a wide conversation, and of course, let's not exclude ASDSA. We at a national level should be also facilitating the conversation at the national level as well, or trying to.
Then there's a further comment. It says, I think it's from Melanie, it's more about production than anything else these days. And I think that's a good point.
Melanie, that's my point. I think it's a ruthless short term. In fact, organizations go from quarter to quarter now, they hit the quarter result. And anyway, we got to change that. Our job. Okay,
John, you've got
Andy,
2 minutes left. Is there anything you want to say in wrapping?
No, for me, I just want to say, as long as I've been able to get people to start thinking, the point I made when I opened the conversation, it was about, I don't know, over a year ago, when this line manager said, oh, we've got to do this, and they're starting to do it. And it's actually amazing in that corporate what they're doing in terms of building career paths and learning pathways. The penny dropped for me. I've been getting my head around it. Hopefully the pennies drop for the audience of today, and this conversation starts to escalate. And if we need a peg in the ground to say why are we having we can go back to the NQF Act, and we can go back to Objective 2, and we can say, our job includes career pathing as well. It's given us the mandate by the NQF Act, and let's go do it. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks so much, John. Thanks everybody for joining us. You'll see that the CPD points link is in the chat box. So if you look for CPD points, please click on there. John, a few more comments are coming in. A very pertinent topic for conversation. Thank you. Thanks to all. Somebody's going to leave, and I see the link is again in the chat box. John, thank you very much. It's been a very engaging session.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye then.